Hi everyone. I wanted to create a presentation that goes over how to communicate professionally, whether it is through an email, a letter, whatever that may be. So let's get started. While writing professional communication, whether it be a work email or a letter, isn't necessarily difficult, there are a few things to keep in mind. First off, it's important to write with good grammar, but that doesn't mean to write in a way that feels pretentious or pedantic, and that means trying to use words that are outside of your vocabulary, and with them being outside of your vocabulary, you end up handling them in a clumsy way. Most importantly, just be genuine. Be yourself. Don't, fall into too much informality or slang. But don't try to go over the top with your word choice. Number two, always assume that if it can be misinterpreted, it will be. Emails do not communicate tone, so you need to be careful to not come off as rude or demanding. And of course, demanding is also very rude. Often when you email someone, you're in no position to demand anything because they can simply not respond. So keep that in mind. It doesn't communicate tone, so you need to make your word choice reflect just the meaning of what you're trying to get across, and that assume that if it can be misinterpreted, that it will be. That also doesn't mean be overly kind. That can come off as disingenuous. So you don't have to be so sweet that your email comes off as precious. That doesn't help either because, again, it comes off as you're being disingenuous. It's clear that you're being so sweet that essentially you're faking it. You don't want to do that either. In terms of tone, go for the 3 C's: calm, collected, and confident. Next up, be concise without being blunt. So that means be straightforward, but don't do so in a way that is so straightforward. Again, it's blunt. Be polite without being precious. So again, this is to be kind, but don't be so overly sweet that you're disingenuous. Next up, this is one that I've come across recently, in recent years, and that is apologizing. Do not apologize. I've received a lot of sorry to bother you emails, and again, this is a part of being confident in your writing, and you don't need to apologize unless there is something you are specifically apologizing for. If somebody has sent you a message and you were at fault with something, you can apologize in that regard, but don't say sorry to bother you or sorry if this is a bad time. If it's a bad time, they won't be checking their email. I think the sorry to bother you thing came from people calling others on the phone, which again I don't understand, because someone can just choose to not answer the phone. Somebody can just choose to not answer your email. So don't apologize. Again, if it's an email, it's always going to be there, so you're not bothering them. Next up, don't ask how someone is doing. Saying, "How are you?" can come off as disingenuous because the reader knows that you are not expecting a reply. Unless it is a friend or someone close and you haven't talked to them in a while and you want to know how they're doing, then ask, "How are you doing? How have you been?" But if you're sending an email to where you're requesting something, don't start with "How are you?" Because now the person, again, in the scope of politeness, is going to feel that, well, they want me to answer that question and tell them how I'm doing, and then they want me to fulfill their request. Just be straightforward. Don't ask how someone's doing or how have you been unless you are expecting a reply. Go for a variation of "I hope this message finds you well," and if you can't think of a variation, just go with that. "I hope this message finds you well." So when it comes to salutations, there's multiple things you can go with, and there's different situations for each. So to whom it may concern, this is a formal greeting for emails when you're unsure of the person, gender, or the title of whom you are sending it to. So if you're sending a resume or a cover letter email or something like that, you're not sure who the hiring manager is, you could say "to whom it may concern." So this is often done when I have no idea the name, title, or whatever of the person on the other side. A good go-to is Dear with their name. This is when you know the person you're sending it to, and it's a strong catch-all. Just Dear name, and leave it like that. If you're on a first name basis with this person, if they're a coworker, you can use their first name. But if it is a superior or someone that you're not necessarily familiar with, you want to use a title and a last name. So let's talk about those. There's Mr., Miss, or Mix. Avoid using Mrs. unless you know for a fact the person is married and using their spouse's last name. Case in point would be Mr. and Mrs. Loredans. So Mrs. Loredans, you would spell that M-R-S period. But in the case of Miss Mangum and Mr. Dubois, well, Miss Mangum is still M.S. Mangum because she has not taken Dubois' last name. And then don't use first names, like I said earlier, unless you're on a first name basis with this person. And also above with Mr., Miss, or Mix, MX is when someone is non-binary, and I would only use MX if you know that that person is non-binary. Some other salutations. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is less formal. It's also more appropriate to send to multiple people, like if you're sending an email to 5 coworkers, and maybe it's like a departmental email or something like that. You can say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And so again, this is more if it's going to multiple people. And so to close, you can use sincerely, best regards, best wishes, or just best. You can put looking forward to hearing from you. I believe it's Mr. Larry from Bird High School. He puts cheers. That's kind of clever. That's kind of unique and very personal. So when in doubt of what kind of closing you should use, go with one of these. So let's talk about structuring the email. And if you want to, you can use this as a template. I have one space between each. First comes the greeting, and then well wishes if necessary. Then the main topic you wish to discuss. It's about maybe 3 to 5 sentences. And then we give it a space, secondary topic or continuation of the first with a slight shift if necessary. Just like in an essay, you start a new paragraph when it shifts to a new topic or a variation of the same topic. So secondary topic or continuation of first with slight shift. That's 1 to 5 sentences. Closing remarks. That's about 3 sentences. That can be anything from looking forward to hearing from you soon, or my mind is going blank. I'm trying to think of other things it could be right now. So closing remarks. Hope to hear from you soon. Maybe I'll be available from this time to this time. Or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Those are your closing remarks. And then you sign off with best regards or best wishes, whatever it may be, in your name. So let's talk about manners. Minding your manners. You always want to leave a good impression, even if the topic is not positive. It's easier to get what you want if the person you're communicating with is on your side. Emails are not essays. Those that are too long will either be ignored or worse, leave a bad impression. A too long email comes across as rambling. Sometimes it comes across, we'll talk about this in a second, but it comes across as passive aggressive. The person's getting everything off their chest. Keep your message concise. If there's a long topic that you need to talk about, ask for a meeting in person or a phone call. Don't write this long email, again, because it's either someone may ignore it or it'll leave an impression of you not being confident enough to talk to them face to face. You're trying to unload in an email, and again, confidence is key. You don't want to come across as someone who's hiding behind a screen. Next up, do not make demands. You are in no position to do so because the recipient can simply choose not to respond. Those have been interesting emails that I've personally received in the past, both as a teacher and in a a corporate setting where I expect a response within 24 hours, and that's a demand. And that is not professional, because what ends up happening is the person on the other end can simply not respond within 24 hours. Maybe this person could be spiteful to some extent, and they could just, no, I'm going to take 36 hours. Did I do that? Not necessarily, because the person, although it was very unprofessional, I felt it important to diffuse the situation. It's important to take the high road in some cases, because this person was acting on a misinterpretation of something. And so things like that, you never want to say, I expect a response, or make a demand of any kind. Again, you are not in a position to do that. Again, do not make value judgments, especially emails to your boss or coworkers. And by a value judgment, I mean don't say that something that they did was bad or wrong, or really in any way calling out any behavior that they do. Just like making demands, you are in no position to do that, because if it's a coworker, if it's a boss or a teacher, they do not answer to you. And so you're not in a position to do that. And it'll only make things worse in terms of people seeing you as less professional than it should be, or than you should be. Do not be passive aggressive. If you have to look up what that means, I'm going to give you time to do that because I've only got about 3.5 minutes left on this video. It comes off as this just horrifying, disgusting combination of rude, annoying, and entitled. So don't be passive aggressive. That is one of the opposites of being confident. If you're confident, you don't have a need to be passive aggressive. The comfort at which you communicate depends on the person. Think of it as a ladder of formality. Formal and polite with those you do not know, or your employer, and I would go a step further and say someone that you answer to, like a teacher, a professor, whoever it may be. Formal and polite. And then polite and relaxed with people you do know. But either way, you are polite, because you never know. It's easy for someone to take an email and forward it to someone else. You never know where it's going to go. So you also, this goes back to having good grammar and meaning what you say. You don't want your words to be taken out of context, or moreover, saying something in email that can never be taken back. And I believe that's it. All right. Well, maybe about 2 minutes to spare. I will close here. Message me with any questions. Thank you.